Hezbollah, the militia group, left absolutely stunned on Tuesday. Thousands of pages used by its members exploded almost simultaneously. This caused carnage across the country. At least 9 people, we understand, were killed. 2,800, possibly slightly more, were injured as the devices blew up in an apparent synchronized attack that the group has blamed on arch-enemy Israel. Hezbollah described the explosions as its biggest security breach and said it held Israel completely responsible for this criminal aggression. In the last hour, we heard that Hezbollah has responded by launching rockets towards, or a missile towards Israel artillery areas. Let's get a word on this from Professor John Strawson, who is Middle East expert and emeritus professor at the University of East London. John, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
I think whether somebody studies this closely, as you do, or whether they are watching from afar, I think we can all agree that this was a completely extraordinary and audacious attack, regardless of where it came from. We'll come back to that. But nothing of this kind has really been seen before. Would that be fair?
Well, it's a very clever attack technologically. It obviously came as a great surprise to Hezbollah. It seems that the pages which exploded had come from a source in Hungary, and that somewhere in the production line or in the shipping process, they were tampered with, either with implanting explosives or possibly a device which would overheat the lithium battery, which would also cause an explosion, which we all know in our mobile phones, sometimes they get very hot, and then a signal which once alerted the pager, they would then explode. So it was obviously a quite sophisticated process. Hezbollah, of course, won't use mobile phones because they believe that the connection to the internet means that they're easier to track by the Israelis. And security is extremely tight for the Hezbollah, particularly for its leadership and its commanders. What actually happened yesterday, obviously, was a large number of young men, mostly in their 20s and 30s, were caught in normal situations. Some of them were shopping, some were with their children, some were at work, who suddenly experienced this quite shocking development, including, of course, the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon, who apparently has lost an eye, which indicates, I doubt that he had a pager, but I suspect he had Hezbollah protection, which indicates how close those two, both Iran and Hezbollah, are.
Whatever somebody thinks of this from a, I guess, an ethical perspective, I suppose one of the positives from the rest of the world who see Hezbollah as a terrorist organisation, one of the positives from this would be, well, it's clearly identified lots of people who are members of Hezbollah.
That's true, but don't forget, Hezbollah fighters are in the region of 70,000. Approximately, ironically, the same size as the British land forces at the present time. So the number of people who were affected actually was quite small. Is something we should bear in mind. Obviously, this was about undermining the confidence in the Hezbollah leadership and between the leadership and the membership, they are able to communicate securely. And that was what it was about. However, it was a very clever tactic, but I don't think it's going to change very much in the relationship between the conflict which has been taking place between Israel and Hezbollah since October the 7th. And as you quite rightly said, there's been quite big exchanges today between Hezbollah, which have attacked northern Israel, and Israel, which has attacked Saida, for example, in Lebanon.
Now, in terms of who's responsible, you wouldn't get great odds if you nip down to the bookmakers right now and put a bet on this, but obviously all fingers point to Israel, but that isn't confirmed. Is it ever likely to be?
Well, Israel has a long policy of not ever admitting to intelligence operations. So I doubt that until, many decades later that we'll actually have the full story of this. What is quite true, as your correspondent said at the beginning, is that it looks like this was an operation which was meant to be used during a major flare-up or a general war in the Middle East, which of course we all still fear, but that actually some intelligence in Hezbollah got wind of this, and that's why it was operated yesterday. Yeah. So it was a clever tactic which doesn't change anything, I don't think. And unfortunately, the war which is taking place, which has displaced both Israelis and Lebanese civilians from the border areas, hundreds of thousands of people probably, that continues. And unless Antony Blinken can do something wonderful in Cairo, where he is at the present time, and advance the ceasefire talks over Gaza, unfortunately, this is going to continue. And events that we saw yesterday could, of course, happen again and spark a much wider conflict in the region, which, of course, will affect us all.
And just a final point, it's been sketchy, the response from other countries, but in terms of, I'm thinking the United Kingdom, I'm thinking France and the United States, of course. Do you imagine there would be a sort of tacit level of condemnation of this kind of response or this kind of way of dealing with an archenemy?
I suspect that what's going to take place is a lot of contact behind the scenes. I should think that's what the Americans are doing at the present time, and also I would think the British and the Europeans will be actually saying to the Israelis, look, this is not really very helpful. It merely exacerbates the current situation, and it makes the prospects of a peaceful region much more difficult and much more complicated. Of course, there will be those who will be celebrating the fact that Iran and its proxies have actually had a big tactical defeat yesterday. Yeah. But I'm afraid to say a tactical defeat is not a strategic victory.
Indeed. John, on that point, thank you, sir. Been great speaking. What a fabulous insight from Professor John Strawson.